Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to be looking at two Major League Soccer games today, both happening May 28th. First, Vancouver Whitecaps against Minnesota United, then Toronto FC versus the Philadelphia Union.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've got some really interesting predictions from SmartBet AI. We're going to unpack things like, injury reports, the AI model outputs themselves, even the weather forecast. See how it all shapes expectations for these really close matchups.
Exactly. And look, our goal here isn't really to pick winners. We're not about crystal balls. It's more about digging into what the data actually suggests about these games, especially since they look so tight on paper. We want to find the surprising bits, understand the nuances, the uncertainties.
Absolutely. It's about navigating the forecasts, seeing where the AI models agree, where they, maybe differ a bit, and what that tells us about the dynamics of each match.
Okay, let's jump right in. First up, Vancouver Whitecaps hosting Minnesota United. It's a BC place. Good news there, it's a closed dome, so no weather dramas. Conditions look cool and clear.
Right, but Vancouver does have, a significant hurdle. They're missing their main creative guy, Ryan Gold. Think of it like a computer missing its CPU for calculating, expected goals or creating chances. Gold's kind of that engine for them.
Yeah, and that absence seems to show up in the expected goals, the XG. So XG, that's basically a measure of chance quality, right? Vancouver's is 1.3, Minnesota's is 1.14. I mean, that's incredibly close.
It really is. And the ELA ratings tell a similar story about their overall strength. ELA ratings, they rank teams based on past results, who they beat, that sort of thing. Vancouver's at 133.33, Minnesota's 1517.97. That difference, about 15 points. Statistically, it's it's kind of negligible. Like the data's just shrugging, no real edge shown there.
Okay, but this is where it gets kind of interesting. We ran a Monte Carlo simulation, played the match 10,000 times in the system, the most likely single scores. One win Vancouver came out top at 13.01%. Then a 1-1 draw at 11.62%, and 0-1 Minnesota at 9.69%. Look how tight those are.
That closeness really hammers home how balanced this looks. And if you look at the overall match outcome probabilities from the simulation, Vancouver win is 40.32%, draws 27.46%, Minnesota win 32.22%. I mean, that's practically a three-way split.
Right. And that draw probability over 27%, that tells you the model isn't super confident either way. It sees a lot of ways this ends level, high uncertainty. Now, digging into the actual SmartBet AI models, we see some disagreements.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The different models within the system see it differently. So like the random forest model, it actually favors Minnesota. But then you've got XG Boost and MLP, two other pretty solid models. They're leaning towards Vancouver.
But this carried Light GBM, which is a newer model, and crucially, the final stacked ensemble model. Now, think of the ensemble as like the super model that weighs the others based on past accuracy. Both Light GBM and that final ensemble. They point to Minnesota.
Exactly. And the fact that the ensemble, the one designed to learn which models are best when, disagrees with some older ones, that feels like a pretty significant signal,
Yeah, it paints a picture, doesn't it? Maybe Vancouver has more ball at home in the dome, but without Gold, maybe you struggle to score. In Minnesota, perhaps less possession, but maybe a bit more direct, faster on the attack.
So if you're looking at this from a data angle, a few things jump out. First, the low XG and the simulation results. They strongly suggest, probably not many goals. Low scoring seems likely.
Right. And even though the ensemble gives Minnesota a slight edge, maybe the betting market doesn't fully see it that way. So there could be some value perhaps in looking at something like double chance, Minnesota, or draw. MLS underdogs sometimes get undervalued, right?
That's true. And another thought is both teams to score. Yes. Even with low XG overall, sometimes you just get those chaos goals, defensive mistakes, weird set pieces, things XG doesn't perfectly capture. Both teams have been a bit leaky, so maybe.
And finally, those top correct scores from the simulation, 1-1 and 0-1 Minnesota. They kind of fit that picture of a tight, low-scoring game. That's where the highest probability lies, according to the sim.
Which raises a good question for you listening.
Yeah.
But how do you use these probabilities? It's not about knowing the exact score, obviously, but about understanding where the data leans and maybe finding value there.
Speaking of things you maybe don't expect, reminds me of that story about Fang, the Philadelphia Union mascot. Did you hear about him getting locked in the stadium overnight?
Ah, yes. The legend of Fang holding down the fort. That was, 2021 or 2022, I think? Apparently the motion sensors went off. Security thought it was a break-in.
Yeah. Only to find this giant snake mascot just wandering around. The headlines were brilliant. Something about Fang holding down the backline solo.
Mhm.
Yeah, my favorite was that he had more clean sheets that night than the Union's entire 2017 defense. Just shows data's great, but football's still wild. Anyway, back to the data for Toronto.
It's a great reminder of the chaos. Okay, yeah, let's shift to the second match, Toronto FC versus Philadelphia Union at BMO Field. And the conditions here, look, challenge.
Oh yeah, forget cool and clear. Toronto's looking at torrential rain, plus like 90% humidity, Ryan's gusting up to maybe 28 miles per hour. That pitch is going to be soaked. Really tough conditions.
You'd almost think extreme weather makes data less useful, but the ELO ratings, they actually show a bigger gap here. Toronto's at 1440.04, Philly's way up at 1424.84. That's an 84-point difference. That's like going up a whole weight class, pretty significant.
But what's really interesting, that big ELO gap doesn't quite show up in the expected goals. Toronto's XG is predicted at 1.11, Philly's only slightly higher at 1.1 a sim. It really shows that XG models don't always fully capture that massive weather impact, which can sometimes level things out.
And the Monte Carlo sim for this game, wow. The top score lines are incredibly close. 1-1 is most likely at 13.38%, but right behind it is 0-1 Philly at 12.01%, and then 1-0 Toronto at 11.13%. I mean, that's pure razor edge territory.
Okay, so what's really noticeable here, compared to the Vancouver game, is the consensus across the individual SmartBet AI models. Unlike that split we saw before, here you've got Random Forest, XGBoost, MLP, and Light GBM. They all individually favor a Philadelphia win. Strong agreement there.
But here's the twist again. Despite all those individual models leaning Philly, that final stacked ensemble model, it's predicting a draw. That's quite something. To have all those models pointing one way and then the ensemble, the supermodel, lands on a stalemate, that feels like a really important signal itself.
It really does. It kind of suggests that while Philly might have the edge on paper, the ensemble sees factors, maybe the awful weather acting as an equalizer, higher chance of errors on a slick pitch, maybe tactics that make a draw more likely overall.
And Toronto's also missing Richie Laurier. He's a key guy for them. That sort of line-breaking runner brings a lot of energy. Without him, maybe even harder to create in those conditions.
Yeah, the analogy I'm thinking of, it's like the weather's so bad, it almost cancels out some quality difference, like a FIFA sim where the rain is so heavy the ball just stops. Even the weather model probably expects a low-scoring grind.
So, putting all that data together, what angles might you consider for this waterlogged game?
Well, given that strong lean across all models towards either a draw or a Philly win, that seems like the place to start, right? Individual models like Philly, ensemble likes the draw. Covering both seems prudent.
Makes sense. And with that kind of rain, yeah, the chaos factor goes up. So both teams to score, yes, maybe comes back into play. Those freak goals, defensive slips in the wet, could definitely see both teams scoring, even if clear chances are rare.
On the other hand, though, that weather is almost certainly going to slow things down, hinder precision. So under 2.5 goals feels like a very strong possibility, too. The conditions themselves might just keep the score down.
Right. And you mentioned a specific potential value pick. Draw, no bet, Philadelphia. Can you break down why that looks appealing here?
Absolutely. So with draw, no bet, if it is a draw, you get your stake back. Simple. If Philly wins, you win the bet. It's basically like a bit of rain insurance. You acknowledge the ensemble's draw prediction by getting your money back if that happens, but you still profit if Philly gets the win, which all the individual models liked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Philly probably has more depth, maybe a more adaptable attack for these conditions compared to Toronto. TFC might struggle more to execute their plan in that weather, especially missing Lauria's drive.
So looking back at both games now, it's important to see that the win probabilities in the simulations were pretty low overall, right? Hovering around that 30, maybe 40% range. It just highlights how much variance there is in football. You have to approach this stuff thinking about managing uncertainty, not expecting guarantees.
Definitely. For Vancouver, Minnesota, that split in the models, that wasn't confusing, it was valuable. It signaled a really tight match where one goal, one mistake could flip it. It basically screamed caution.
Right, and then contrasting that with Toronto-Philly, you have that strong convergence. All 5 individual classifiers point to draw or Philly win. Even though the ensemble picked draw, that level of agreement is still a significant signal, even if it's not, a lock.
And, tight XG numbers and those close Monte Carlo margins in both games, they really back up that overall model view, especially for the messy Toronto game. Everything points to close contests.
Exactly. So in these deep dives, we found some potential edges, situational ones like weather and injuries, and maybe some model market edges, like Philly potentially being undervalued in certain draw markets.
And I think the really crucial thing for you listening is that SmartBet or any good data analysis isn't about removing uncertainty, it's about quantifying it. Understanding the probability of different outcomes is just essential for assessing risk, for making informed decisions when you're trying to figure out what might happen.
Precisely. So our thinking for weeks like this, where the numbers don't scream one way or the other, is probably, think about more modest wagers, smaller stakes.
Hmm.
Use the models as a guide, find potential value, navigate the uncertainty, but never just blindly follow them.
Because, yeah, at the end of the day, probability is not a guarantee. No amount of data can predict every deflection, every referee decision, every bit of chaos in football, but it can definitely help us make smarter choices, navigate that chaos a bit better.
So the main takeaway for you is really focus on probabilities, not promises. Smart bet. This kind of analysis, it gives you edges, probabilistic views. It's not a fortune teller. It's maybe, like buying a decent toaster instead of one is going to break. More reliable, but still not guaranteed toast every single time.
That's a good way to put it, and that's why the long-term view is key. Think like a quant analyst, right? Focus on volume, discipline, expected value over time, not just the thrill of one bet.
And the absolute basic rule, the foundation. If the data doesn't show you a clear edge, there's just no reason to bet. Be selective. Be strategic.
Well said. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the MLS data. Hope you found it useful.
Absolutely. And hey, if you want more of these data-driven insights, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future deep dives.
And until next time, stay safe out there. And if you're near Toronto, maybe stay dry.
And just a reminder, please always gamble responsibly. If you're in North America and need support, the National Problem Gambling Helpline is 1-800-522-4700. In the UK, you can find help at begambleaware.org or call 0808-8020-133.
Yeah, and please remember, everything we discussed today is purely for informational purposes. The predictions are AI generated, they're not financial advice or betting advice. Always bet responsibly and only what you can afford.
And finally, always make sure you're following all the local laws and regulations about sports betting and gambling wherever you are.